So who is monitoring your bank accounts to prevent fraud? If you ask a Cloverdale couple, it's not the banks.
Thousands of dollars disappeared from their bank accounts, but because the PIN was used from their stolen debit cards, they were held liable.
So who is monitoring your bank accounts to prevent fraud? If you ask a Cloverdale couple, it's not the banks. Thousands of dollars disappeared from their bank accounts, but because the PIN was used from their stolen debit cards, they were held liable. Chip read error. Please swipe. You sigh. Swipe your card, enter your PIN, move on. That small decision just downgraded your security to 1970s technology and handed a criminal everything they need to drain your account. It's called the card fallback scam. Spreading faster than banks will admit. Looks like an accident. What if it's not? Today I'm showing you exactly what happens inside that card reader during those 10 seconds you never question. Stick around. The final warning could save your bank account this week. Let's get into it. The downgrade trap, how criminals force your card to betray you. If criminals can't break the chip of your card, they make it irrelevant. That's the real trick behind the card fallback scam. It isn't about defeating encryption, it's about forcing the terminal to abandon it. When you insert your card, the chip is designed to generate a unique, encrypted code for that specific purchase. It changes every single time. Even if someone intercepted it, they couldn't reuse it. That's why banks spent years pushing EMV chip technology. But here's where criminals intervene. Inside the card slot, they insert something almost invisible, a thin plastic shim or adhesive film that blocks the metal contacts from touching your chip. The terminal detects no chip. It assumes damage. Then it does exactly what it was programmed to do as a backup. It activates fallback mode, and fallback mode means swipe. At that moment, your transaction shifts from dynamic encryption to static broadcast data. Unlike chips, magnetic stripes store the same card number, expiration date, and service code permanently. Every swipe transmits identical information. Once you swipe, a skimming overlay hidden inside or attached to the reader copies your magnetic stripe data in seconds. These devices are inexpensive and widely available on underground marketplaces. With that captured data, criminals can encode a blank card in under 5 minutes. But data alone isn't enough to drain a checking account. They need your PIN. And this is where the operation becomes layered. Small pinhole cameras are often mounted directly above keypads or embedded in terminal casings. Some transmit via Bluetooth. Others store footage on micro SD cards to be retrieved later. When you enter your PIN, it's recorded clearly, digit by digit. Now the criminals have both ingredients, the cloned stripe and the PIN. The U.S. Secret Service Financial Crimes Task Force reported seizing over 18,000 counterfeit cards between 2022 and 2024 that were created using captured magnetic stripe data. What makes this scam especially dangerous is its silence. The terminal does not warn you that your security has been downgraded. It does not notify the merchant. It does not alert your bank that a chip card processed as a swipe. To the system, everything looks routine, and routine behavior weakens fraud detection. When your cloned card is later used at an ATM, the bank sees a magnetic stripe transaction. If you recently swiped your card after a chip error, that activity pattern appears consistent. The fraud department doesn't immediately see a red flag because you technically authorized a swipe earlier. That's the strategic brilliance of fallback fraud. It blends the criminal's activity with your own behavior, but understanding how they capture your data is only half the story. Because once that clone is made, they don't test it slowly, they move fast. And in the next section, you'll see exactly how accounts get emptied, sometimes in less than 60 minutes, and why debit card holders face a much harsher financial reality than credit card users. 60 minutes to zero, how your account gets drained before you wake up. Imagine it's 11:07 p.m. You're asleep, your phone is on silent mode, your debit card is in your wallet on your dresser. 3 states away, someone you've never met slides a cloned version of your card into an ATM. Withdrawal, $500. 6 minutes later, another ATM across town. Withdrawal, $300, and another. By midnight, your checking account balance is racing towards zero, and you have no idea. This is how fallback fraud ends. Once they clone your card and capture your PIN, they know the clock is ticking. The longer they wait, the higher the chance you'll notice something is wrong. So they hit fast, often targeting multiple ATMs in different zip codes within an hour. According to FICO's 2023 ATM fraud report, US ATM cash-out fraud losses rose by 23% in 2023. Largely driven by card skimming and cloned magnetic stripe activity. Once fallback data is captured, it's converted into immediate cash withdrawals. This is where debit cards become dangerous. When a cloned debit card is used, the money doesn't sit on a credit line waiting to be disputed. It comes directly out of your checking account. Rent money, tuition, utility bills, groceries, it's gone immediately. Under the Electronic Fund Transfer Act, your liability depends on how quickly you report the fraud. If you notify your bank within 2 business days, your maximum loss is capped at $50. Wait longer, and it can jump to $500. Wait more than 60 days after your statement is sent, and you could be responsible for the entire amount. Most victims don't notice within 2 days, especially if they aren't checking their balances daily. Now picture this part. It's Friday morning, you call your bank. After verification questions, you explain that you didn't authorize those withdrawals. The fraud department asks, "Have you recently swiped your card anywhere?" You think back, yes, 2 days ago. The chip didn't work at a grocery self-checkout. You swiped and entered your PIN. From their system's perspective, that matters. The fraudulent ATM withdrawals also show magnetic stripe activity with correct PIN entry. That behavior doesn't immediately scream counterfeit. It looks like cardholder usage. Your claim goes into investigation. They freeze your account. You're told it may take up to 10 business days to resolve. Meanwhile, automatic payments begin bouncing. Overdraft fees stack quietly in the background. By the time the investigation finishes, the cash is unrecoverable. It's been withdrawn, split, transferred, sometimes even converted to cryptocurrency. Unlike digital fraud, cash leaves no reversal button. You thought you experienced a minor card reader glitch. Instead, you experienced a controlled downgrade that gave criminals access to your physical cash pipeline. And here's the part most people don't ask until it's too late. If debit cards expose you like this, why are they still pushed as everyday payment tools? And how can the distinction between debit and credit fraud protection determine whether you get your money back quickly or fight for weeks to see it again? The protection gap. Why debit cards leave you exposed. Here's the part banks rarely explain clearly. Not all fraud protections are created equal. When your debit card is cloned through a fallback scam, the money that disappears is yours, not the bank's. That single difference changes everything about how fast you recover, how much stress you endure, and how hard the institution fights on your behalf. Credit cards operate under the Fair Credit Billing Act, FCBA. Your maximum liability for unauthorized charges is $50, and most issuers waive even that. More importantly, disputed charges sit on a credit line. You're not deprived of cash while the investigation happens. Debit cards fall under a different law entirely, the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. Liability increases depending on how quickly you report the fraud. But here's the deeper issue. Even if your liability is capped, your funds can remain frozen during the investigation. That creates a dangerous time gap. According to Javelin Strategy and Research's 2023 Identity Fraud Study, debit card fraud victims waited an average of 10 to 14 days for full fund restoration in 2023. 10 to 14 days without access to rent money, payroll deposits, or bill payments. This is where fallback fraud becomes financially disruptive, not just inconvenient.
Of course, immediate access to your bank account.
When a cloned debit card is used at ATMs, criminals withdraw cash. Cash is immediate and irreversible. The bank must investigate before crediting you back because they're recovering physical currency losses, not reversing a digital authorization. And here's what strengthens the bank's hesitation. You entered your PIN. From a risk model standpoint, correct PIN usage suggests authorized access. Even if the card was cloned, the system logs show proper credentials. That forces banks to analyze transaction timing, geolocation inconsistencies, and spending patterns before issuing reimbursement. Now contrast that with credit cards. If a fallback scam captures your credit card's magnetic stripe data but you never entered a PIN, fraud often shows up as retail purchase. Credit card issuers can instantly freeze the card and issue provisional credit while investigating. The money never leaves your checking account. This legal distinction shapes criminal strategy. Fallback scams overwhelmingly target debit cards because they allow ATM withdrawals. ATM withdrawals convert stolen data into untraceable cash within minutes. Retail fraud using credit cards can be reversed or disputed with less friction. Furthermore, many consumers treat debit cards as safer because they don't involve debt. But fraud exposure isn't about debt, it's about liquidity. Debit fraud freezes liquidity. Credit fraud freezes a credit line. If fallback fraud is a downgrade trap, then debit cards are the payout mechanism. The uncomfortable question becomes, if the chip was designed to protect you, why is the magnetic stripe still active at all? And how does this built-in backdoor make this scam scalable? The backdoor. They never closed. For 10 years, payment networks told us one thing: The chip makes you safe. And they weren't lying, but they weren't telling the whole truth either. Visa, MasterCard, and Discover spent billions promoting EMV chip technology after the 2015 liability shift. Commercials, bank mailers, checkout signage all reinforced one unified message: insert your chip for secure, encrypted transactions. But here's the detail that rarely makes it into advertisements. They never removed the magnetic stripe. Yes, every chip card still carries 1970s swipe technology on the back, and every terminal in the country still has fallback mode enabled. That isn't an accident, it's a compatibility decision. Fallback exists, so damaged, chips can still process transactions. It keeps commerce moving, it prevents declined sales, it protects merchant revenue, but that convenience created a permanent backdoor. According to EMV Co's Global Adoption Report, over 90% of card-present transactions in the US are now chip-enabled, yet magnetic stripe acceptance remains active nationwide. That means even in a chip-dominant environment, the downgrade pathway is still built into the system, and criminals rely on that. Here's why this matters. Fallback mode does not generate a warning. It doesn't alert your bank that encryption was bypassed. It doesn't notify the merchant that a chip read failed under suspicious conditions. The system treats it as normal behavior. From a fraud analytics perspective, that's powerful camouflage. If fallback were disabled by default, this scam would collapse overnight. But disabling it would also increase declined transactions, and declined transactions cost merchants money. So the stripe remains, giving criminals the opportunity to exploit the downgrade gap between security and convenience. And nowhere is that gap more profitable than at gas stations. Because unlike grocery stores or retail counters, gas pump terminals sit outdoors, unmonitored for hours at a time, and many still rely heavily on swipe fallback compatibility. In the next section, I'll move outside to the most targeted environment in the country for this fallback scam, and the reason criminals prefer pumps over registers. Gas pumps, the perfect outdoor crime scene. If criminals had to design the ideal environment for fallback fraud, it would look exactly like a gas station. Unattended terminals, outdoor exposure, limited employee supervision, and payment hardware that often goes months, sometimes years, without inspection. Unlike indoor retail terminals that are visible to staff and customers, pump readers are enclosed inside metal housings. Criminals don't need advanced hacking skills to access them. Many fuel dispensers use universal master keys that can be purchased online for under $10. Once opened, the interior provides direct access to the card reader assembly. From there, installation is simple. A thin, chip-blocking insert is placed into the card slot to force fallback mode. A magnetic stripe skimmer is connected in line with the reader's data cable. A pinhole camera is mounted discreetly above the keypad, often disguised within the pump frame or under a panel edge. The housing is closed. The security sticker is replaced with a duplicate adhesive seal. The pump looks untouched. Then the waiting begins. According to the National Association of Convenience Stores, gas pump skimming costs consumers over $1.2 billion annually in the United States. That number reflects both traditional skimming and fallback manipulation, and gas stations remain the most frequently compromised location category. Here's why fallback specifically thrives at pumps. Most outdoor terminals still require chip insertion instead of tap to pay. When the chip read fails, drivers assume weather, dust, or wear caused the issue. Swiping feels routine. There's no line of customers watching, no social pressure, no reason to suspect tampering. And because pumps are often spread across large lots, criminals can install devices at multiple dispensers in a single visit. They don't even need to return physically in many cases. Advanced skimmers now use Bluetooth or cellular modules to transmit captured magnetic stripe data wirelessly. A criminal can sit inside a parked vehicle and collect card data in real time as drivers swipe after seeing the chip error. By the time station management notices suspicious activity, often days later, dozens of card numbers may already be harvested. There's another layer most drivers don't consider: software lag. The EMV liability shift for gas stations was delayed until 2020. Some independent operators postponed upgrades due to cost. Even today, older pump systems default aggressively to magnetic stripe fallback when chip reads fail. That design choice keeps transactions flowing. It also keeps the downgrade door open. And when a cloned debit card from a gas pump is used at an ATM, responsibility becomes blurred. The station points to the bank points to customer behavior. The fallback event appears voluntary. You swiped. The criminal withdrew. The system sees continuity, but gas stations aren't the only environment where familiarity lowers your guard. Just swipe it. How restaurants turn comfort into vulnerability. immediately. The most dangerous place for fallback fraud isn't where you feel rushed, it's where you feel safe. And restaurants create the perfect psychological cover. You're seated, you've eaten, you're relaxed. The server brings a handheld payment terminal to your table. You insert your chip card. Pause. Chip not detected. Please swipe. The server shrugs. Oh, that happens sometimes. Just swipe it, and that single sentence dissolves suspicion. This is where fallback fraud becomes social engineering. Unlike gas stations where devices are hidden inside hardware, restaurant fraud often relies on proximity and trust. Handheld POS terminals can be tampered with just like fixed readers. A thin overlay can sit over the magnetic stripe reader. The chip slot can be deliberately disabled. The keypad can be fully visible to anyone standing nearby. You swipe, you enter your PIN, the transaction is approved, dinner ends normally. But behind that routine moment, two things may have happened. Your Stripe data was captured and your PIN was observed or recorded. According to Javelin Strategy and Research's 2023 identity fraud study, restaurants and food service establishments account for approximately 22% of card-present fraud incidents in the US. Why so high? Because the environment suppresses skepticism. You're less likely to inspect the terminal, less likely to question a chip error, less likely to shield your keypad aggressively. In some cases, the employee may not even be aware of the compromise. A tampered device can circulate between shifts unnoticed, but there have also been organized cases where employees were recruited into fraud rings. One South Florida investigation in 2023 uncovered a network that recruited servers across multiple restaurants. Tampered terminals were rotated between locations. Employees were paid flat fees per shift for allowing fallback swipes to occur. Thousands of card numbers were collected before detection. Here's what makes restaurant fallback particularly hard to trace. Fraud rarely happens immediately. Criminals often wait 3 to 7 days before using cloned data. By then, you've used your card at several other locations. When unauthorized withdrawals appear, you can't pinpoint which transaction was compromised. And because you entered your PIN during that fallback swipe, the cloned ATM withdrawal later appears technically authenticated. The environment you trusted became the collection point. But here's where controls start shifting back to you. Because while you can't control how payment networks build fallback systems, you can control how your card behaves and how quickly you respond. The countermeasures: how to shut the downgrade door. Fallback fraud only works if your card allows the downgrade. So the first move is technical. Log into your bank's mobile app and search for card controls or manage debit card settings. Some banks now allow you to disable magnetic stripe transactions entirely. The feature may appear as swipe transactions, mag stripe purchases, or non-chip transactions. If you can toggle it off, do it. That alone makes forced fallback physically impossible. Second, activate real-time transaction alerts for every debit purchase, not just transactions over a set dollar amount. Set the threshold to $0 if possible. Microcharges are often test transactions before full ATM withdrawals. Third, at gas stations, choose credit instead of debit, even when using your debit card. That bypasses PIN entry and prevents ATM cash-out capability if cloned. And finally, if a chip error appears twice at the same terminal, cancel the transaction and switch payment methods. Fallback fraud doesn't rely on hacking your bank, it relies on you trusting the error message. The next time a terminal asks you to swipe after a chip failure, pause. Try once more. If it fails again, walk away. Change payment methods. Protect the upgrade your card was designed to use. If you or your loved one has ever had a chip error that later turned into missing money, share your